there could be so many opportunities, I think, hidden silver linings of this big dark cloud that we're all experiencing.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers.
Well, welcome everyone. I am so excited to see so many of you here. And I know that a lot of you have identified yourself using our name, Accidental Homeschooler. Maybe you're a sudden homeschooler. Maybe that's a more accurate term. I know some of you here are teachers who sent all your kids home because you had no choice. And now maybe you're biting your nails. What on earth are those parents going to do to ruin my students? So we're really hoping that we're going to give some great advice for you parents and for you teachers that you can survive these next couple weeks, maybe even months, and just see how this all goes. So let me just kind of give you a little bit of background about Andrew and me. Actually, I work for Andrew. I've been working for Andrew for about 12 years. So some of you, these were literally headlines I pulled off from the website today. School closures skyrocket. 54 million students were sent home. Teachers scramble. Trump urges schooling from home. I mean, all of these headlines, this is real. There's a lot of you out there who are now suddenly faced with, what do I do? So what does this actually mean? So while the states are trying to figure this all out, while the teachers are trying to figure out what this means, we're just asking, maybe we can offer some help, because both Andrew and I have homeschooled in the past. I actually did teach in a classroom for several years, so I've got a little bit of that background. And Andrew, if you've never heard Andrew Pudewa speak before, I think you're in for a treat tonight. But he is an excellent speaker. He speaks at homeschool conventions across the nation. Oh, not anymore. All those homeschool conferences were canceled. But he is doing an online conference that you can check out this weekend. And we have a link for that at one of the last slides. So let me just kind of give you a background of what we're going to be talking about. So while they figure it out, here's what you can do. You can establish a good culture in your home. Andrew's going to be talking about this. Curriculum, what kind of curriculum should you really be focusing on? You might have your kids home through May or June. What's the most important thing? And care. How can you care for your family? How can you care for yourself? And, there is a coronavirus going around, so let's be wise. So that's kind of our outline for tonight. And Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, this is a rather rare case for a webinar. I think we very possibly have the largest variety of participants in a webinar that I have ever seen. People homeschooling for 1 week versus people who've been homeschooling for 2 decades or more. I saw Cambodia, Malaysia, of course, our neighbors to North Canada, the foreign country of New York. No, sorry. So that's very exciting. Australia, great. The second thing that makes this very unique is that Julie is here with me, and we're sharing the duties of bringing you the best we can. This is actually a webinar that was supposed to be a completely different thing, only I believe it was last Tuesday, maybe or Wednesday, I was informed that we are changing the whole topic of the webinar to this one. And so Julie worked very hard all day together with me. She did most of all the work to put together what we could in terms of these, these ideas. So good to see all of you. So culture, when we talk about culture, I think it's a very interesting thing because it's a word that has three analogous meanings. One meaning, the one we most commonly think of, is culture, the stuff of the world around us. So the books and the movies and the music and the fashion and the food and the architecture and even the politics to some degree. And we throw that all into one big basket and call it culture. But there's a couple more definitions of this word that kind of, I think, enlighten us when we consider some other ways this word is used. The second would be our corporate culture, and that would be the way we do things around here. So, we at IEW, we have a business and we have certain ways of doing things and schedules and kind of almost, certain patterns and rituals that we have created and try to follow, which creates a corporate culture. You have this at home, too. All of us have a culture at home. But the third definition is the one I think that gives us the most interesting insight into the purpose of the other two, and that would be the petri dish. You probably remember when you were in school, middle school, high school, whatever, you took a class, maybe biology, and you had that little dish of yellow jello. Do you remember the yellow jello? And that we called a culture. And of course, you would put something, some bacteria or something, into the little dish of yellow jello. And if it grew well, then your culture was good. It was nourishing and growing what you want to have. If it is not a good culture, if it's antiseptic or toxic, then you don't grow what you're trying to grow. And I think this is so important because, it's kind of obvious that the word culture is cognate, very closely connected with the word cultivate. A culture is supposed to cultivate something. And so when we ask then, what is it that the books and the movies and the art and the music and the architecture and the stuff of life is, what is it supposedly trying to cultivate? We don't have a lot of control over that. People like me can whine about bad music and bad movies and bad books, but I can't prevent them from existing. I can only filter that as it comes into my corporate culture, my home. And so that's our big job. One of the things that we who have been involved in homeschooling for a long time notice that there's very often a progression in the culture at home and how it changes. Often, phase one, people decide to homeschool, and so they want to do school at home. They want to recreate that environment of the classroom and the curriculum, even going so far as to get, little desks and a flag in the front of the room and a whiteboard and a multiplication table chart on the wall, and then a little pile of books with the right number on the cover corresponding with the grade level of the child. And so they're trying to recreate then what they remember or what they believe happens in schools in the home. That's kind of phase one. And then very often what happens is, a few things can happen. Number one, you can kind of hit overwhelm or burnout, especially if you have several kids and they're all in different grade levels and you're trying to juggle 4 or 5 subjects at 2 or 3 or 4 or more different grade levels. And that can kind of reach a point where you just don't know how you can keep track of it all. And lesson planning takes you till 1 a.m. like a normal school teacher, and you think, I just can't do this. There's got to be something else. Phase two, I think then you start to realize, well, some of these things that we're doing, we could probably do together. We could group our children and we could have them, we could read to everybody the same book at the same time. We could all learn some of the same poems. We could do math facts drills with the 2 oldest and the 2 youngest separately, that they're really, even though they may be a year or 2 apart, they're not necessarily a grade or 2 distant in the things that they can engage in learning. And so that kind of phase two Often I find people can chunk kids, they can get a little more relaxed about curriculum and still use appropriate textbooks and whatnot to help them stay on track, but they feel a little happier. And then in phase three, I think you kind of get to the point where you realize there's a difference between school at home and home education, and that honestly you can accomplish a good chunk of what happens, during the day in terms of academics in a relatively short period of time compared to being in school for 6 or 7 hours. And then you have time to do other things and build the culture at home. The question that I would encourage everyone to contemplate and discuss, perhaps with a spouse, maybe with the kids themselves, but you want to ask yourself, what am I trying to cultivate? I've got my kids home now. I want to more intentionally bring in, guide, shape, mold this culture at home. So what are the goals that I have? What am I trying to cultivate? And make your list. People would have a different list. Some people would say, I'm trying to cultivate a love of learning. Some people would say, I'm trying to cultivate character qualities, wisdom and virtue. I'm trying to cultivate a more independent learner. I'm trying to cultivate a stronger love for siblings and family members and fellow man. I'm trying to cultivate strong faith. So if you take some time and make that kind of high level list and say, what am I trying to grow in my children and grow in our family? I think that will help guide you as you make decisions about how you move probably from this school at home, the way school is, to a type of homeschooling that is perhaps a little more nurturing of what you're trying to nurture. And, that is a good exercise for every parent, whether or not you continue teaching your children at home after this craziness is over or not. It's still a good exercise to say, what is it that we really want to do in our home culture? Well, what are some things that you might like to do in order to cultivate some of those things you like to cultivate? Some of them are pretty obvious, like eat and sleep. We do that every day anyway. The good news is some of these things we can do a little more intentionally. Laugh, of course, is very, very important. I have done many talks and am a big fan of using humor and levity in teaching. If you've ever watched any of my classes for children, you will notice that I like to embed humor as best I can in the lessons. These are a couple very humorous videos that you could probably watch at your leisure either way. There's a Facebook group called Homeschooling Help, and there's quite a number of very humorous different memes and videos, and it's a rapidly growing Facebook group. It's also an opportunity, I think, for children to get a little more opportunity for chores and working together beside you. I know that in a busy life, it is sometimes easier to just do something yourself than to have a young child help with that. But now they're there, and now you have time. And so to work on the things that need to be done to maintain the house. Of course, if you're in the house all day, every day, there's a little more maintenance required as a result of that. And of course, one of the huge advantages, I think, of homeschooling, especially if you have teenagers, is they don't have to get up at such an absurdly early hour. So, and the girls, it's worse because they need at least an hour to fix their face and figure out what they're going to wear, or maybe more, and then, eat and get out the door, sometimes get on a bus or be in a car, and then have to make it, to school to start at, high school, sometimes it's some horrible hour, 7:45, 8:15. And then one book I want to highly recommend, and Laura, maybe you could put up a link to this. This had a tremendously beneficial effect on me personally. It explained me, it explained my family, it explained teenagers, it explained all the problems of the world. It's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And I just strongly encourage everyone to read, or I listened to the book. The Audible is very good. And what I became acutely aware of is that most teenagers are chronically sleep deprived because their circadian rhythms shift forward, and they simply can't sleep at 10:30 or 11. Many times they can't sleep till midnight or 1 o'clock, and then they have to get up so early in order to be at school. Well, if they're not having to be at school, they can get more sleep, and this could improve all sorts of things. It could improve their emotional condition. It could improve their learning ability. It could improve their attitude throughout the day. So strongly recommend that. Learning, of course, is what we're going to be talking about in various ways. But, learning not in the strict, it comes from a textbook, you get tested on it, did you learn it sense, but more looking at the holistic experience. And, of course, opportunity, the family that prays together does well. And so those are a few things that you would put on an agenda. And I start with that because, we want it to be kind of a very natural and organic extension of daily life. So curriculum. If you think about curriculum simply, it is very easy to get overwhelmed with all of the, quote, subjects that people believe they have to study. This tends to get even more complex in middle school and high school when you have a school schedule with 6 different classes, or a transcript that has so many different, subjects that have to be done. I would strongly recommend that you think simply about curriculum, especially during this time of transition, and just divide things into 2 categories: sciences and arts. Sciences and arts, the arts and sciences. Now, of course, within that, there are some additional divisions. But that way, every day you can ask yourself and say, okay, have I done some arts and have I done some science? And if the answer is yes, then you can say success, which I anticipate you will be able to say every day with some simple guidelines. With science, we very often think of it as something that you have to learn from a textbook. It has lots of obscure terminology and explanations for things, and that's all very important in many ways. But this is an opportunity where you can perhaps say, well, let's take a little bit more of a poetic approach. Could we possibly spend some time outside instead of looking at the book? And maybe we would start to improve our powers of observation. Perhaps we would experience things in a multisensory. Perhaps we would be able to notice things that we haven't noticed before. And so what we would recommend at this point is this idea of, keep up with your math so that you don't forget the stuff you know. It's actually, in math, almost more important to maintain what you know and be able to do that with a little bit better speed and accuracy than to continually learn new subjects. So if you have students, you have a math book, and you don't feel like you want to necessarily, jump into the next subject or the next, level of complexity, feel free to kind of camp out, and that fits with the nature theme as well. Feel free to camp out and simply practice those things that your children know. So, if they are learning their multiplication tables and it's still a little on the, slow and hesitant side, don't rush into division. Just work with that for a while. If they're in division and that's still a little bit on the slower, rusty side, don't jump too far forward into fractions. So wherever they are, if you make your primary goal for what they're doing now to become faster and easier and more accurate, that's sufficient for you at the time. You don't always be having to introduce a new concept. I have a talk, and Laura, maybe you could put a link to it. I have a talk entitled Ability Development, Mastery Learning, and Individualized Education. And I talk about the importance of that mastery of math so that moving into a higher level of complexity is more easily successful. There are so many math resources online. I'm sure that many of you have started to look into that and see what you could find. Everything, gosh, from, Teachers Pay Teachers to all sorts of free stuff with different homeschooling sites, Khan Academy, worksheets, downloadable, printable worksheets. So there's lots there that you can deal with. And so keep the math up. And then really, I would strongly encourage that you use the opportunity of being home, particularly because in many places it is and will be continuing to get warmer and spring, and the trees are blossoming in many places, and the birds are out, and there's going to be, I think, over the next few months, if this craziness lasts that long, plenty of opportunity to connect with nature in a way that we often don't have time just because of the busyness of the school day and the work day and the homework that has to be done and all that. I have a talk, and Laura will post the link to the talk. I actually stole the title for my talk from this particular book, Nature Deficit Disorder. And this is a fantastic book, Last Child in the Woods. And he talks about the consequences of being separated from nature in the way that modern children are so much more than we were as children, and probably we were much more separated from nature than our parents were and their grandparents and so on. So the great thing about being home and not having to be at school all day is that you can't go to Starbucks, you can't go to Tacos for Life, you can't go to the library, you can't go to almost any place. And in some places, you're not even supposed to go anywhere. But there's always the backyard. There are parks. And, most places you can, with a relatively short drive, get out of a city and find a state park or a national park and just take the day and say, hey, let's not do school today. Let's not worry about the academics. Let's get in the car. On the way, we'll listen to a good audiobook, and we'll just spend the day outside. And this, I think, may have some hidden benefits. I was mentioning actually to Julia last week, my wife and I try to take a walk most afternoons or early evenings, and I happened to be home, and we went out and we're walking about 3 o'clock in the afternoon in our neighborhood. We live in the city here. We have these little subdivisions, and we walk around. And what was so delightful was to see an unusually large number of families outside together. Older middle-aged moms shooting hoops with a teenage boy who obviously was going to outshoot her big time. Families of 2 parents and 3 kids riding a bike down the road. A soccer game, with mom and dad and 4 kids in the backyard. All sorts of things that you wouldn't normally see on a weekday afternoon at 3:30, 4 o'clock. Why? Well, because mom and dad weren't able to go to work, or they were working from home. Kids weren't in school. And so there could be so many opportunities, I think, hidden silver linings of this big dark cloud that we're all experiencing in terms of building family through many activities, and in particular, those being outside. So I strongly, strongly recommend that you at least listen to my talk, Nature Deficit Disorder. And then if you're interested, you can actually you can read a lot of Richard Louv's research on a couple different websites that he has. And so I think if you spend time outside, a la Charlotte Mason, a la Maria Montessori, a la the way it was for many people through most of history, you'll gain some really good firsthand, sensory rich science curriculum. And you can kind of relax a little bit more if that. Yes, Sherry, you're right. Some government parks are closed, and that's too bad. But Shenandoah was doing free admission. Is that in Virginia, Rachel, Shenandoah? Because I think I used to live right around there. Another thing that gets you outside, and you don't have to go anywhere to do this, it's also the right time of year, and that is to start a little garden. I'm not sure this has quite the same appeal to teenagers as it might to younger children, but I know that my wife has, always been very interested in her gardening and getting the kids out there to help plant the seeds and learn what should go where and planning what to do. And, you can combine this, of course, with some research on how to do it well. If you're not an experienced or natural gardener, which I am definitely not a natural gardener, there's so many resources that you have available. One idea, and I had one daughter who really got into this, and that was square foot gardening. And it just takes a very little bit of space. You don't need a huge backyard. You don't need to dig up all your, grass or plant beds or whatever. You can actually start in a fairly simple way, little raised bed. Even the project of building the frame would be a great thing to do with the kids. And so this idea of square foot gardening, it is amazing how many vegetables you can get out of a dozen square feet. It's really, and there's nothing quite as satisfying as eating the carrot that you plucked out of the ground or the tomato that you pulled off the vine, or in my case, the hot peppers that you grew yourself, which for some reason aren't ever as hot as I wish they were, but maybe I need to research a little more what makes hot peppers hotter in terms of that. So getting out and, you could probably get a big, thick textbook that said botany on the cover and spend a year studying and reading and trying to memorize stuff and taking, quizzes or tests. And then 3 months, 6 months after you had finished that, what percentage of that textbook really would you retain? Probably most of you would guess not that much, 10% if you're a genius, 5% if you're average, 2% if you're me. So, but then think about the whole process of doing a garden. And like I said, learning what should grow next to what to reduce the bugs and what type of best things grow in which climate and when to plant, and all of that is going to be probably more real useful botany that you would take into your experience, from your experience into adulthood. So that's an idea I think very good to consider if you can. Arts. One of the things that we think about, of course, is music and fine art. Many of you have perhaps children that play the piano or the violin. That would make me happy. Or even the recorder or xylophone. Hopefully not saxophone or drums, but maybe you do have that. The great thing about having more free time, if you want to call it that, is that you've got more time to play music. If you don't have children doing music lessons, or if you haven't started but you want to, there are many things you can do now. Just getting a simple recorder, simple penny whistle, flute, and learning simple little melodies and practicing that a bit to add it into your day. And of course, singing. Singing is something that used to kind of be universal in all curriculums. We were just talking about this in the panel discussion that I was in Saturday as part of the virtual conference, which I'll mention. We're doing another one of these this coming weekend, and we were talking just almost the whole hour just about music and singing, how every child sings, and yet we kind of have lost our cultural orientation towards singing as a family. And so maybe that's something that you could come up with. And of course, resources online, folk songs that you probably know the melody to, but you've forgotten some of the words because you haven't sang it in a while. And of course, hymns, if you're so inclined. I know Steve Demme, he has a wonderful book of family hymns. So if you don't have one, maybe you could get a hold of something like that. The fine arts, of course, is that's something that is always an opportunity. Children love to very often, draw pictures or play with Play-Doh or clay. Perhaps you could do something a little wild and radical and say, hey, let's make a family mural. Take the pictures off the wall, get some tempera paints or whatever, draw something and let everybody participate in painting. And of course, you will have to repaint your wall when you sell your house years or decades from now, but you will have to repaint your wall when you sell your house years or decades from now anyway. So why not consider something a little bit just on the edge of what you might normally consider reasonable? And that, of course, is going to bring some joy and laughter to everyone, and resources available. I'm also a fan of the Drawing with Children book, and it helps every child start remembering, but something a little bit on the edge that you might not normally do, I think is what I was saying. Oh, I'm kind of a fan of this curriculum, Drawing with Children, by Mona Brooks, the Monart School, because a lot of children don't like drawing if they're afraid it won't be good. I was like that as a kid. And so this, teaches step by step how to draw something. And there's lots of videos, YouTube and online videos on how to draw one thing or another. So lots of physical activity. It's tough, if you are cooped in the house all day. I hope you got a chance to watch or you do at some point, the video of that little boy in the obstacle course that his parents made for him around the house. Could you rearrange your house and make it a little more friendly for physical activity, an indoor Nerf soccer or indoor Nerf battle if you can't get outside? If you can, of course, the only thing kids really need is a couple balls. And boy, I spent a good 2 hours playing soccer against two of my grandchildren, 7 and 4 years old, and the 4-year-old was still trying to get the hang of where to try to make the ball go to get through the goal. But you just get outside, and you don't have to worry about what do you have to do next. You've got that freedom for a lot more physical activity, and possibly even some kind of formal exercise or gymnastics or something that you could do all together as a family. Language arts, I think you want to keep it simple. We tend to think of language arts as being a very complex, involved thing, starting with phonics and reading comprehension, and then spelling and handwriting, and then literature and public speaking and grammar and composition, and the list goes on, and it just seems very overwhelming. So if you know us, if you know IEW, you'll notice our tagline. Almost always when we have our logo, right below it we have the tagline: listen, speak, read, write, think. Listen, speak, read, write. And if you think of language arts as that, are you doing some listening? Are you doing some speaking? Are you doing some reading? Are you doing some writing at an age-appropriate, aptitude-appropriate level? One of the best integrators of language arts, as Mrs. Ingham always put it, poetry, is the great integrator. And I fear that we don't value or experience poetry today the way we used to, perhaps in generations past. And this is one thing, I have a very strong love for myself, and also an appreciation of the value of not just reading poetry, but actually learning it, which means you memorize it and then you recite it, and it becomes something that builds your vocabulary, it builds your syntax and grammatical variation. It builds your comprehension. It contributes to your imagination. There's so many wonderful things that memorizing poetry can do for you. Reading aloud should be probably at the core of a language arts curriculum. There's probably, in my view, there's probably nothing more important you can do in any given day than read out loud to your children of all ages. We tend to, I think, favor younger children, and kids read on their own, and then they've got their homework, their school assignment, the book they're supposed to read for school, and so we go, yes, you go read your book, and that'll free me up to do, the picture book, Ping and the beautiful Yangtze River here one more time with the 4-year-old. But what so many people have found, and I'm sure some of you participants could chime in on the real value of reading out loud to the whole family, a good or book that you want to read, an engaging book. We're going to put up some resources later, and one of those I'm going to share with you is a good friend of mine, Sarah McKenzie, and her website, the Read Aloud Revival. She's got book lists that are wonderful and appropriate for read alouds, and a whole discussion going on there with reading aloud to the family. So if you just did that and then spent the rest of the day outside and then did a little bit of math to not forget stuff, that would be a huge success for a homeschool day in my thinking. If you don't give children something good to memorize, they will memorize whatever garbage is in their environment. Now, I thought I had accomplished something truly great when I was probably 11 years old, and that is with help of the television commercial that came on many dozens of times, every cycle of watching, Batman or Star Trek reruns. I memorized the formula for a Big Mac. 2 all beef, patch, sauce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. However, my colleague Julie Walker here, she upped me. So Julie, would you turn on your mic and do what you did to me earlier today? Because it kind of blew my mind and it deflated me, because I thought my accomplishment is nothing compared to your accomplishment.
Okay, you ready? It's kind of embarrassing that I can still do this. Bun, seed, sesame, onions, pickles, cheese, lettuce, sauce, specials, patties, beef, all two.
Why did you do that?
Because I had nothing else good to memorize, clearly.
So, we have a poetry memorization program. Maybe Laura, you can put up a link to that. It's still the favorite thing I've ever done. It's like a Suzuki method for poetry memorization. And in the special package that we're offering you at the end of this, we actually provide for you at no cost all of level 1, which is 20 poems, the poems themselves, some background information, some coloring sheets if kids are into that, as well as links to the audio of me reciting these poems, so that you can start right off on having your children memorize good and beautiful things rather than kind of silly or meaningless or random things. And I'd say any of those of you who've done a little bit of poetry memorization with your children, maybe you'd like to just type in briefly what were some of the best things. Oh, Shanna, I'm so glad that you asked this question. She asked, how do you get boys to do this? Memorize poetry, I assume. Well, I specifically found poems that are what I would consider boy-friendly. For example, Anna said The Vulture is her favorite by Belloc. Goes like this: the vulture eats between his meals, and that's the reason why he very, very rarely feels as well as you or I. His eye is dull, his head is bald, his neck is growing thinner. Oh, what a lesson for us all, to only eat at dinner. That's a boy poem. Jabberwocky is a boy poem. So there are quite a number of poems that are either humorous, a little bit violent, perhaps on the edge of disgusting, or tell a story, or preferably all of those mixed together. And I have found that if you do start with the right kind of poems, you can capture the imagination of boys. And what would be fun is, of course, now we're all into this kind of not being able to see, regularly people that we might be able to see, such as grandparents or aunts, uncles, relatives. So children can memorize a poem and then Skype grandma and recite a couple of their poems there.
Well, and I'm just going to chime in, Andrew, with that because, I introduced you to a new tool today that I would like to know in the chat box how many of you have heard of this brand new thing that just came out, 10 years ago? Marco Polo. How many of you know Marco Polo? That is a great way to share these poems with people. Yep. I try and read my story to my granddaughter every night with the Marco Polo.
It's like the idiot Skype, maybe, something like that.
Yeah, it's not live, so it's really nice. You can record it. And you want to know what her favorite book is right now? Trashy Town. She wants to hear me read Trashy Town.
Good. I wanted to talk just a little bit in favor of cooking. This is something that I became aware of really when a couple of my older daughters went to college maybe 10 years ago. And they were very surprised. So Marco Polo, Walter, Marco Polo is an app. And it is a app where you can record video and send it directly to other people who have the Marco Polo on their phone. So you can try downloading it if you want to. Yeah, so I wanted to mention cooking. I became aware when I had a couple older daughters. They went to college, and they were shocked that the people in the dormitory that they lived with, almost none of them, and these were all girls, knew how to cook much at all. Like, couldn't even prepare a pot of rice. And they were kind of shocked because all my girls grew up learning to cook and cooking very well, which is extremely nice. At my older age, when I go to visit them, I can always be certain of excellent meals. But I was kind of surprised to hear that. And then I realized if that's true for the girls out there, it's probably even more true that very few boys are learning to cook. And I am profoundly grateful that my mother, who was, she was a working mom. She taught piano and voice in our home. And so she was busy, usually, right up around till dinner time or whatnot. But she managed to find time to teach me to cook stuff. And in fact, it was my job, probably from the age of, 10 or 11, all the way till I was maybe 15, 16. It was my job to cook dinner every Wednesday night. And she would be sure to have the ingredients. And sometimes it was something simple like hamburger helper, just, cook the beef and throw the mix in and stir it around and make a salad. Other times, things a little more involved, fried chicken and having to learn how to grill and bake. And I remember one time I was very ambitious to follow a recipe and try to make a chocolate mousse. You had to whip the blasted egg whites, and then you had to melt in the chocolate perfectly. It didn't come out great, but I left childhood believing that I knew how to cook. And then when I lived alone for several years in Japan, I cooked for myself. And now I cook for myself because my wife is busier than I am, and I like it. And so we actually share our cooking responsibilities. And I just can't encourage you enough to make that a part of the curriculum. And what better time when you've got the kids home during the day and you can, teach them how to read a recipe and measure things out with the cups and spoons, and then how to, intuitively throw in a dash of this and a bit of that. So I just think, cooking, and I see Darlene sewing. I didn't get as good a background in sewing, but my mother did show me basically how to use a sewing machine, how to thread a needle, and how to stitch up something that had been ripped. I probably wouldn't go so far as to do that myself right now. I would probably ask my wife to do it, but at least in a pinch, I could. So, these are some of the practical arts. If you're thinking sciences and arts, we've got music and fine arts, we've got language arts, and there are some very practical arts that you could focus in on and have time when your children are at home there. Talk about screens. This is, of course, one of the things that we notice children today spend magnitudes more of their time looking at screens. When I was young, of course, there was no internet, but television existed. However, it was very regulated. There were windows where I could watch a certain show, and then there were windows where the family watched a certain show. Movies, you still had to go to a theater. Video machines didn't really come into existence till I was late teens. And of course, now we've got just ubiquitous everything. So, there are good screen time, of course, educational. One of the very best possible educational screen time activities, in my opinion, would be watching writing classes published by the Institute for Excellence in Writing, which of course would be me teaching kids how to write with structure and style. And I thought it would be nice if we were to throw out a few movies that you may or may not be familiar with, appropriate for different age groups. And I would be, very happy if some of you wanted to throw out some of your own favorite movies so that you could take notes. Toy Story, The Jungle Book, the old one, Beauty and the Beast, Middle School, October Sky, Swiss Family Robinson. I might put elementary, I don't know. My 7-year-old grandson watched Swiss Family Robinson and then tried to narrate the entire movie back to me. One of my all-time absolute favorite movies is actually about spelling, and it's educational, but it's more about character and virtue. Although it does have a very interesting aspect on how to study. Very inspiring, very motivating, and that's Aquila and the Bee. High school, I guess a couple favorites around here would be Dead Poets Society. The Scarlet and the Black is a wonderful historical story about a real man who lived, Monsignor O'Flaherty, who lived in the Vatican during World War II and ran kind of an underground railroad, helping Jews and prisoners escape from the Nazis. Great story. Sound of Music is probably the movie I have seen more than any other movie, and honestly, I would go watch it again. The Greatest Showman, okay, I'm fine with that as long as you actually read at least the Wikipedia article on P.T. Barnum so that the movie doesn't give you 95% wrong information about who he was. And I don't know, how many times can one family watch The Princess Bride? I'm sure it's in the dozens, possibly in the hundreds. So good. And I see you're all sharing, oh, The Scarlet Pimpernel, 82 version. Yes. Secondhand Lions. Oh, Cynthia. Love that movie. Secondhand Lions. Little Women, almost any version except the newest one. This Land Is Mine. Jeremy, I've never heard of that one. So, yeah. Indian in the Cupboard, National Velvet, Sergeant York. Hey, you guys are going to give each other all enough of a list that'll keep you busy for several weeks of watching classic films. Last night, my wife and I watched a movie, pretty old. It's got a very, very young-looking Tom Hanks, called Joe and the Volcano. And I think this movie was made 30 years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago. And what struck me was that in that time there was this kind of innocence and virtue that was really portrayed in the movie and appreciated so much more than what we see today, which would be, the problem of bad screen time. And of course, all of those things where, the games are simply a distraction, they have the possibility of becoming somewhat addictive, an escapism type thing. We all, I think, have games that we play on screens, but with children, it is especially important to help them, do that in moderation and not use it as a kind of escape out of everything else. So, a friend of mine wrote an article called "In Praise of Boredom," and then I searched it and I found that a whole lot of people have written things and titled them "In Praise of Boredom." If you do a web search on the benefits of boredom, you will find all sorts of articles from, opinion all the way to research in Scientific American or Psychology Today magazine. One thing that's kind of interesting, I remember reading years ago, is that it actually requires more brain activity to stare at a blank wall than it does to watch a sitcom on TV. Well, why? Well, if you're staring at a blank wall, you would have to imagine stuff. You'd have to remember stuff. You would have to explore what's in your brain. Otherwise, you would actually die of boredom. But what I've noticed is that children very often, if they have the time and they have the resources and they don't have those things that are generally, entertaining them, if the entertainment side of life is removed, and of course most all children believe they have a right to continuous entertainment. But if that's removed, then suddenly they're forced to use their imagination in industry, become a little bit more creative or experimental, especially if they're, if they're outside, they can just start putting stuff together and building things and making things and having more of an imagination. So don't be afraid. Of course, most of us, of our generation, if we said to our parents, "I'm bored," well, Mom would suddenly have a nice list of chores that would need to be done, probably starting with cleaning the toilets. So I learned you do not say, "I'm bored," to parents. I don't know if children in this generation have that same experience, but perhaps that would be something to consider. Or, it's not, the fact that you're bored isn't my problem. It's your problem. What can you do to solve that problem? And that kind of attitude. All right, we want to share with you some of the things we have here. We've put together a package of 3 weeks of English language arts instruction, and I hope the components here are on this next page. So what you know, okay, do you want to
sure they are.
Why don't you quickly tell
I'm just
people
going to go ahead and
what's in this package,
Yeah.
just so I don't get it wrong.
Sure. So it's 3 weeks of writing, but if you actually did all 3 weeks of this writing, you'd probably have more writing instruction than you might have gotten in 6 months. Just because you assign a lot of work, Andrew, but it's really good and the kids love it. And if they don't love the writing, they'll love the jokes. And so you'll want to have that. So there's writing, there's grammar built into the writing and grammar. There's also vocabulary. And then we also have the poetry memorization course. And this slide, this particular link right here, you fill out the form and then you'll get an email, and then you click here on the email and that will take you to this page that gives you your writing, your grammar, your vocabulary, and then down here are all the little boxes to check. What's really important, we want you to remember this, you guys. Listen to me. Are you listening? Bookmark the link to the videos. People get going and then they forget where they put the videos. The videos, just bookmark that link. That's where you're going to get the jokes. and the writing instruction, free writing instruction, but you have to get the free jokes too. So that's what we're giving away just to get you started. And then we
Can
started a
people
new
share that
homeschool
link
helping
with anyone?
Absolutely. Just go back to, let me go back to that slide that you can share with people. It is this one right here, iew.com/lessons20. If you click on that right now, it will take you right there because that's a live link, but go ahead and share it. We've had thousands and thousands of people be introduced to this. And honestly, it should not take much explanation. Just get going. It's kind of one of those, just start the video, download the PDFs, open, and go. Pretty easy. And someone was asking in the chat, do we give you a list of poems? Well, the poetry memorization course, you have 20 poems to memorize, so that should get you going there. So I mentioned this new homeschooling help page. This is just, we started this just, Saturday, just to help people, help all of you, the hundreds of you here tonight. If you have any questions about how to homeschool, whether you do it for 6 years or 6 weeks and you're just trying to survive, I hope what you've heard tonight from Andrew and maybe from me too is, you know what, just relax. You're going to get through probably a lot more learning than what you expect by just relaxing and getting outside and focusing on what's the most important things. Andrew mentioned a few links. I want to just post these all right here. Surprised by Homeschooling is an excellent blog post that Jennifer Mauser from our IEW team wrote about what to do about homeschooling. Some of those things that we mentioned here tonight. Center for Lit has some free literature lessons. Christy Clover wrote a book called Homeschool Basics. And we're actually giving away 5 copies of that book, so you can click on that link to enter our drawing to get that book. Sarah McKinsey, Andrew mentioned, has a readaloudrevival.com. And one of the things that she's doing now, you fill out a survey and she tells you what's the next 3 books you should read out loud to your children, which is really fun. And then when you're all done, you get to take it again and she gives you 3 more books to recommend. I just love it. And then this weekend, Andrew is speaking at the virtual homeschool convention called classicalconferences.com. So you can click on that link and register for that. So wow, you guys, as we were putting this together, I was thinking of my days. I'm all done homeschooling. My baby is 31 years old, so it's been a long time since I've homeschooled. Did not teach him the Big Mac song. Sorry, just couldn't do it. But all those years ago when I would walk those homeschool convention halls and be completely overwhelmed, we don't want to overwhelm you. Have some fun with your families, relax, enjoy each other, put them on a schedule just so that they know what they can expect next. If you are working from home, just call them your coworkers, right? Excuse me, my coworker needs some attention right now. Go take care of your kids, get them outside, and just enjoy this rare time that you have with your kids. So I wanted to share a couple things as a homeschooling mom emeritus, been there, done that, did most of the homeschooling myself. And that is, don't be afraid to get input from your kids about what they want to do. Hey mom, I would really like to try this really cool thing. If this really cool thing is not watching SpongeBob SquarePants, then it might be okay. Enjoy the time you have. And also, please just be COVID wise. Wash your hands. Social distance. There's a reason why you guys are home right now. And don't undo what we're trying to do right here, which is to flatten the curve. The curve is real. And then one last slide I'm going to share with you. This is our Magalog. For homeschoolers or for full-time teachers, we serve all people in any educational path, whether they're teaching their children at home, whether they're teaching their children in a classroom. We've got materials and resources for them. A lot of them are completely free. If you go to this link, you can request a Magalog for free. And inside that link inside the Magalog are resources to our free premium membership, which gives you a free shipping code, a free book that Andrew wrote. I'm overwhelming you guys. I'm going to stop now. But here's the link to enter the drawing again.
There's a few questions that are outstanding, but I hope that's been useful to the many of you. I think this is one of the best webinar turnouts we've had in a long time. and I'm overwhelmed with the excitement that you all have about either continuing your homeschooling life or beginning, perhaps, a homeschooling adventure or bridging your time from here to there. So we are here to help you. I'll finish with this one question Sarah asked about transitioning a public school teen to homeschooling. And that's, of course, a very general question, and all homeschooling teens are different. The boys often miss different things about school than the girls. Probably the biggest thing is just friends and connection. And so giving them opportunity, but not unlimited opportunity, to keep in touch with their friends through probably text and Instagram is where they would be. And I would encourage you to talk to this teen and say, this is an opportunity for you to really kind of take responsibility for your own curriculum, for your own education. This is a chance for you to say, hey, what interests me more than other things that maybe I had to do at school that weren't as interesting? And then you assist him or her in being able to pursue learning about those things which are of greater interest. I think what every teenager really wants is responsibility for themselves, for learning, responsibility to help make the world a better place, and the freedom to kind of pursue what may be the glimmerings of some kind of sense of calling or mission in life. So I would just encourage that public school teen and say, hey, this is a great opportunity that you might otherwise have had to escape the boring stuff and pursue that which you would find most interesting, and I will help you do that. So that would be my bit there. Walter, I don't have a specific website related to the benefits of boredom, but I guarantee you, if you just do a web search on benefits of boredom, you will find more links than you probably want to read. So I think that does clear off all the questions, and we are a little bit past the bottom of the hour, so we'll wrap it up here with our closing music. And again,
Andrew, there's one more question. Someone was asking what grade level is the
we have had people buy it for an elementary student and discover that the 5-year-old's learning poems as faster than the 10-year-old. I have actually had someone as old as 80-something buy the poetry program because she wanted to remember and learn poems to help her memory in old age. So I don't think there's any, particular grade. If you think of it kind of like, anybody can start playing the violin. You can start at 4 or 14 or 40 or 80. You can start memorizing poetry at any age as well. So, Misty, don't be scared, because you've got all the help you need. We will help what we can. You will find other like-minded people, and you just take it one day at a time. All right, let's wrap it up with that, and God bless you all.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, you can subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcast. Until then, on behalf of Andrew Pudewa and the team at IEW, I thank you for allowing us to partner with you on your journey toward better listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking.